This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We appreciate you joining us here again for Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement. I tell you what, guys, a very, very special episode on here for today. I mean, Mark, we have a whole different kind of a subject matter we're going to approach, different than usual, because we actually have a special guest here joining us and kind of a professional that you think our listeners should be benefiting from and preparing for when it comes to retirement. That's why they're here today. So please, Mark, introduce our guest and tell us why you felt so strongly about having him join us today.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. So Russell Bowler is an estate planning attorney here in Las Vegas in Southern Nevada, and he is a founding partner of Bowler Twitchell, a local firm. And I just love working with Russell. He's been kind enough to help us with the public events we do, these 6-hour classes that we've talked about often over the radio show. He comes in and he does an estate planning section there. And I just feel so strongly, I've been doing this 32 years or so now. And I just feel so strongly that I cannot be the be all and end all, as it were, for all of my clients. There are other specialists that have to be involved. And so I always want to have an estate planning attorney on the team. I always want to have a certified public accountant on the team. And, the clients can choose whoever they want to work with, but I kind of quarterback this situation often when it comes to creating or clarifying the retirement dream, as it were. But when it comes to designing the vehicle to get you to your dream destination, that's really the role of the attorney, is to get the legal documents in place, those structures in place, so that your intentions play out, even if you don't live as long as you intended to or thought you may. And so there definitely needs to be an estate planning attorney on the team. There needs to be an accountant on the team. And in the best environment, the clients allow us to speak to one another. They authorize that. So I'm often having conversations with an attorney or an accountant behind the scenes because I have blind spots too, like any other human. And they're able to give me perhaps a broader perspective or a finite perspective of things, and vice versa. We've worked with a lot of attorneys over the years. The thing I love most about Russell is he just doesn't have the ego that so many attorneys have, and he's all about the client, and it always has to be about the client. The other thing is he took a unique path into estate planning, having previously trained as an accountant and got licensed as a CPA. But Russell, let me shut up and let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit, if you would, about the path you took into law and why estate planning in particular has become your specialization.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the introduction. It's good to be with you guys. So I decided after a few years of not having a major in college to go into declare a business major and get a degree in a business degree, and to get a major in accounting, or to major in the accounting. And I just thought that's a good job. You're always going to need an accountant. And so it seemed to be safe. And I always kind of had in the back of my head, maybe I'll go to law school, maybe I won't. And after graduating college, I went to work for a public accounting firm. I worked there for about a year and a half. And during that time, I decided I was going to go to law school. I thought, no reason to not go sooner, or go sooner than later. And so I decided to go to law school. I had about a year and a half working for an accounting firm, doing some auditing and some tax work. And as I got into law school, I thought, business is my undergraduate degree. I have some accounting experience. I think it'll just be a good fit with estate planning because of all the business and tax issues that arise in that area.
And any second thoughts about that, or have you loved that choice ever since?
It's been a good choice for me. Yeah, I haven't had second thoughts.
So you took a unique path into law. Tell us a little bit about what you enjoy most about this specialization. I mean, there's got to be specific things that you do for your clients that give you satisfaction beyond just obviously the monetary compensation that comes with being a professional.
And that's a good question. I like seeing people be prepared, because I think not being prepared gives people a great deal of stress. And once they put a plan into place that they feel is going to carry out their wishes when they die, it gives them more comfort. And I'll just tell you, early on in my career as an estate planner, sometimes we'd go out, I'd be sent out as a new guy to people's houses. And sometimes people were pretty close to passing away. I mean, they were close. And sometimes you'd go and you'd finish their estate plan, and then a week later or so, soon they'd pass. And some of the ladies at the firm called me the angel of death.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and
no.
I said, no, I'm giving them peace of mind so they can go to the next life. So, and I think that is a big part of it. It does give people peace of mind. Hey, things are in order. When I go, things will be the way that I want them. The people I want in charge are in charge, and the way I want my assets to be distributed is set forth in writing.
This is a tough conversation. You are the guy, right, Russell, unfortunately, that everybody says, I'll call you tomorrow, because I don't want to talk about this. So how does that work? How do you navigate those conversations?
Yeah, if they're talking to me, they've come to the point, I guess, where they're not putting it off anymore, right? So they're ready to move forward. And then it's just a matter of, I think, trying to put them at ease. Like, hey, yeah, I know I talk about death and planning for death every day. This is a new thing for you. So it's kind of a sobering reality. I'm planning for what's going to happen after I die, but just try to put them at ease that this is something that needs to be in place. We're not going to cheat death. What's the old saying? The two certainties are death and taxes.
That's
and
right.
We just have to plan for both. You can't stick your head in the sand and hope both will go away. And so just kind of have a frank conversation about, I understand this can be difficult at times, but it needs to be done in advance, because if you don't, and then you come to that point where it needs to be in place and it's not, you're worse off. So that the advanced planning is the way to handle that.
Well, it's an interesting process too, I've found, because, we're all on the same conveyor belt. We're all headed into the same sunset, as it were. And so that those anxieties are completely natural. It's been incredibly fulfilling for me to have had individuals literally call me to their deathbed and thank me for making sure that their wife or their children were going to be okay. And I'm sure that Russell's experienced things like that on a much greater scale, even because he's given that contractual assurance through the trust and all that he creates. But at the end of the day, it's really about those other people. I think that's what gives that. And correct me, Russell, if you have a different perspective on this, but I think that peace of mind really comes from the fact that people, as they get into retirement, as they get towards the end of life, they're really thinking about the people they love most. It's rarely about themselves, in my experience, that they're doing
Correct.
These things. They're doing these because there's someone in the picture that they love, or many people that they love, or institutions, And so I found that to be incredibly satisfying, because you can get very creative. And has that been your experience as well, Russell?
Yeah, I agree with that. And just helping people put that plan in place so that they know what they want is going to happen. They, that they are going to bless the lives or that they want to bless and benefit the people or institutions that they want to benefit. And that's very fulfilling for them to have that done, and for me to help them do that.
Russell, for those that think, all right, I put all the hard work in, I've got the plan together, I know exactly where my assets, my money, my family, how everyone's being taken care of, they think they have everything in order. What do you find to be the top 3 mistakes that people make when they're trying to get their financial and family affairs in order?
Yeah, so when they're trying, as I think about the biggest mistake is not to do anything. If we're moving forward and saying, okay, they're doing something, then what are the mistakes that are made? Number one, I would say, is not using a professional. Sometimes people will do it on their own. That tends to not end as well most of the time that I've reviewed them. Of course, I haven't reviewed most of those, but most of them that I have, they're not well done, and they would have benefited from having a professional do it. Mm-hmm. A second mistake I often see is people will put a nice plan into effect using a revocable living trust and a pour-over will, and then they won't actually transfer the assets to the trust, or the terminology is often used, fund the trust. They either won't fund it at all, or they'll only partially fund it. And so they're paid to have a plan to avoid probate, and then they end up not avoiding probate.
Do you find that that people sometimes have anxiety about meeting with you as an attorney? I mean, because again, we don't know what we don't know, so what to expect, of that process? I mean, what kind of process do you take them through as they, kind of clarify for themselves what they really want?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I try to make it as comfortable as possible, but sit down and say, the basic idea behind estate planning is we want to put people in place to make decisions for you when you're not able to make those decisions. And that's either going to be because you've passed away or you've become incapacitated. And we want people making decisions as to what medical care you're going to receive and how your assets are managed for you if you're still living and incapacitated, or for your loved ones if you've passed away. And just say, let's put this into place so that if incapacity occurs, you're ready, and when death occurs, you're ready. And just try to make them comfortable with this is planning that is really going to help you and bless your family.
I appreciate you bringing up that incapacitation, that idea of becoming incapable of managing our own affairs. Most of us just think estate planning is about dying. It's
Right.
kind of like what's going to happen after I'm gone. But the living hell, in my opinion, is not dying and being stuck there. The morning after the stroke, you can't communicate what your desires are, and you got to sit there and watch your family suffer through that. So that, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's a key part of the conversation you're having with people is the incapacitation as well, because it's definitely something we talk about.
Definitely one of the events that you need to be ready to encounter and be prepared for if it happens. And I would say with most people that I've planned for, that doesn't happen. They do pass, but they don't suffer from incapacity. But it does happen to a lot of people. Memory loss is a real issue. And it really is nice to have a revocable living and trust in place where the assets are in it, and somebody, if they are incapacitated and a family member needs to step in, they don't need court supervision to gain control over that. And I tell people all the time, you want to put people in charge of you who you really trust, because if this happens, they're going to be taking care of you, and you want to make
you're
sure
at their mercy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's
Right.
another element, Jess, of estate planning. You asked me about mistakes, is sometimes not keeping abreast of changes. So like if 15 years ago you named somebody and now they're not fit to be in charge of your assets or your decision making, you just need to keep abreast of changes that are occurring and making sure that your plan is still in place the way you want it to be, that the people you've named or the people you want to be in those positions.
So you're saying that the legal work isn't just a one-time check the box and you're done? It's an
Correct.
ongoing process?
Correct. Yeah. Keep current, every few years at a minimum, say, hey, is this still what I want to have in place? Or the people I've named to make decisions for me, the people I still want? Number one, are they still alive? Do they have, the capacity to do it? And are they still fit to do it, and still aligned with my thinking and the ones that I want taking care of me or my family if I pass?
And you talk about the whole process of being prepared, and we talk about, of course, estate planning, legacy planning, that kind of deal. I think a lot of folks hear those terms and they think, oh God, estate, like I don't live on an estate. I don't have a mansion, so I don't need an estate or a legacy plan or anything. My family, they'll just figure it out. It'll be fine. I think it's like a myth. It's a rumor. It's whatever you want to call it, because everybody's entitled to an estate plan, a legacy plan. Would you agree?
Sure. Almost everybody I've ever met could benefit from some planning. Even if they have a very small estate, very modest assets, there's still some planning that would benefit them. For example, they need the medical decision-making put in place. So they have in place for the medical providers, here's who I want to make decisions for me, and here's generally what I want, the type of decisions I want them to make.
So when you talk about that incapacity, is that so? If I'm hearing you correctly, you're going beyond just the kind of pull the plug instruction that most of us think of. Who's going to pull the plug when I can't do it for myself?
Right.
But there's other issues. I think I'm hearing you say. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Because I'm a big fan of family conversations well in advance,
Right.
family meetings well in advance of all this. But can you elaborate on those other kind of, incapacity issues?
Right. So, I think first you're talking about end of life, right? Pulling the plug when it kind of comes down to that. But people will live with memory loss to some degree, sometimes for over a decade. Usually not from what I've seen, but they can live for years with diminished capacity, and they may have, if they have a revocable living trust, normally that will say, if I'm incapacitated, my successor trustee steps in and manages it for my benefit. It's all there for my benefit, but somebody else is going to manage it. And so you could have somebody living in a state of diminished capacity for some time, where somebody is managing the trust and using it for their benefit.
So these trusts and all are not just for wealthy people.
correct. And that can benefit people with modest estates. And normally what I see is if somebody has a house, they own a house, or, even if they have a mortgage on it, a trust will usually serve them pretty well. They're usually better off with a trust than without one. In Southern Nevada, where I practice, or usually is a very beneficial planning move for them to have an estate plan that includes a revocable living trust.
Well, that actually brings up another good point, because here in Southern Nevada, it's a very transient population. People are coming in and going out because of the nature of the work here, but we also have a lot of retirees coming in from places like California, where it's become a little oppressive or whatever. So if people have already done estate planning elsewhere, do they need to do it again when they come into Nevada? Or, is there carryover from one state to another?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question. Normally, we've seen a number in my firm. We've seen a number of estate plans, and I've actually administered wills and trusts that have been done in another state without any modifications after they move to Nevada. So the general rule is it doesn't have to be updated, but a better approach is to actually have an attorney look at it and say, is there anything that would, I would be benefited by updating? So, for example, maybe in your example, it says California law applies. And maybe they want to modify it enough to have Nevada law apply. So it's being modified to the law of the state where they're domiciled or, permanent resident now.
What about people who have property in multiple states? I mean, my wife and son live in a different state, for example. It's not uncommon for multiple homes.
So a revocable living trust is a good tool to avoid probate in each state. So if somebody has property in multiple states, so let's say, for example, I have a home in Nevada and a home in Utah, and I don't have a revocable living trust, but a will, and I pass away, I will have a probate in both states, most likely. And if I put both of those properties in a revocable living trust, I'll have a probate in neither state. And so that's kind of one of the red flags. So do I need a trust? Do you have properties in multiple states? Then it's a good thing to look at and probably move forward with establishing a revocable living trust.
And so this probate idea that we're trying to avoid, that's really when people can argue over the estate, right? When creditors or family members or others can get all involved, and we don't want that headache.
Yeah, they can with a revocable living trust also, but the probate is an administration that's court supervised. In Nevada, as a general rule, it's court supervised, and it's a public proceeding. So anybody can see what's going on. If it's in a trust, you still have to administer it, and the beneficiaries have a right to know what's going on, and they could still argue about it, but it's not automatically in a courtroom setting, whereas a probate is. Sometimes you'll see a revocable living trust being brought before a court because somebody doesn't like what the trustee's doing, or has a question about what the trust means or something like that. So those things that often happen with a will can still happen with a trust. But generally, the trust administration doesn't go before a court as part of a court proceeding, whereas a will always does if the assets are going through a probate administration.
You talk about the importance here about wills and estates and trusts and legacy planning. I found this stat. It says over the next 20 years, about $84 trillion will be passed down to the next generation in what's being called the Great Wealth Transfer. So that just really puts in perspective to those listening. I mean, if you're part of that $84 trillion trying to pass down a legacy, an estate plan, a trust to your loved ones, it is crucial that you get a plan in place.
You hear about these horror stories of wealthy people who haven't done it. I've heard about Elvis and certainly Prince, Aretha Franklin. Some of these have been in the news lately. And I guess that you'd think people like that would have better advice or would have done things like this. This shouldn't be a mystery. I mean, we talk about it with normal people that we work with, and yet you see big names and all people who don't. What is it? I mean, how does that happen?
I don't know for sure, but I think maybe some of it is, I'll do that tomorrow, and then, that bites them because they die before they get it done. Some people, I think, I've heard people say, and I try to help them understand this is not a good philosophy to have, but I've heard people say, well, I'll be dead. I won't have to worry about it.
And listen, that happens all the time. Parents say, somebody else will deal with it, or I don't have to deal with it. And that's not the mentality. I mean, that's terrible. Essentially, you're putting a burden on your family.
Right. And with these large estates, like when you see these celebrities who have very large estates and they fail, even a well-structured, simple estate plan would benefit them greatly. And,
and yet it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of planning often goes a long ways. When somebody has a much larger estate, there's lots of other things that can be done, and maybe they talk to lawyers who are high end and want to do all sorts of things, and it makes them a little wary of they're just going to do this and this and do too much. But maybe if they start with a simple estate plan and then build on that, would be a nice way to do it. And then if something does happen, at least that basic well-structured estate plan is in place.
So if you love someone, you ought to do something, it sounds like. I mean, at the end of the day, because you're
Correct.
Otherwise, as Jess was suggesting there, I mean, you're really leaving a headache behind for people.
I mean, I think this whole conversation between estate planning and legacy plan, it all goes back. It's a full circle moment here, folks, about having, that foundational income plan, that retirement plan, that financial plan, and, legacy, estate, and wills, all that stuff is all part of this conversation. I think, if you're listening to the show and you think retirement is all about just being able to pay the bills and that paycheck stops, I mean, yeah, sort of, kind of, but there's also, these other chapters you haven't thought about. When you're no longer here, where do you want all your hard-earned money to go to? Do you want to pass it to family? How do you want to pass it to family? There's taxes involved. There's all sorts of things. And as you mentioned here, lots of celebrities had gazillion millions of dollars. Michael Jackson, Elvis, Aretha Franklin, they didn't do it right. We're trying to step in and help you, listening right now, do it right and put it together. So Mark and Russell, let's talk about this. For those that are listening, trying to get all their ducks in a row, how do they begin this process with both of you?
That's a great, I would say, I like an analogy of travel, because that's really what this third chapter of life is about, is kind of writing our own story. And so now Russell may have a different take on this, and I welcome it, but I find that through the conversations that I have with people, we're able to clarify what they want, kind of their dream, as it were. But just with with any other trip, there's going to be vehicles involved that have to get you to your location. Sometimes that's a financial product or vehicle, but other times it simply needs to be designed. And that's where, in my mind, the attorney comes involved, is how do we design the right type of vehicle? Is it a sedan? Is it a boat? What is it? We've got to design this. And to me, that's really a role that an attorney takes. You can't have the one advisor fully successful without the other advisor involved. What's your take on that, Russell?
Yeah, I just having multiple advisors is a good approach. One of my first bosses said, 2 heads are better than one. If you have 2 people at the table, and you talked about, Mark, having different backgrounds and skill sets, it really is beneficial to the client. With that, and the attorney kind of drafting the legal documents, I find, that meet together, talk about what's needed all together, and then the attorney, as the client, sets forth, here's where I want to be, here's the goals I have, here's how I want to benefit my children, here's who I want in charge. Then we just sit down and have that conversation. And normally, Jess, I meet with people for 30 minutes to an hour just in a free consultation and tell them, look, here's, based on what you've told me, here's what I recommend for you. Here's how I would put this into place. And, then I'll tell them, and here's what I would charge in a flat fee for that. And they can, move forward at that point, or they can say, no, I want to think about this, sleep on it, or I want to get another opinion, and I'm fine with that. That's great. At least I'm giving them, my view on what they need to do to be protected and have their goals met upon, incapacity, death, that planning for those events.
So Russell, for those interested listening right now going, I have questions for Russell and I want to put this together, what's some of your contact information people can look you up?
I generally, sometimes people email off our website. It's nevadalegalcounsel.com, but normally just call 702-436-4333, ask for Russell, and we'll set an appointment. And sometimes people want to do the first consultation by video conference or telephone call, and I'm open to that also.
Well, so thanks again, Russell. We appreciate you being here with us and helping support really what we're trying to do, which is help our clients and help their families, their loved ones, protect themselves. Retirement planning really is about protection. So, folks, if you're hearing anything today that rings a bell or makes you feel like you just need to act, give us a call. Give Russell a call. You can go to his website, as he said, NevadaLegalCounsel.com. And he's been very kind there in saying that they actually do these free consultations to help you see if it's a good fit. That's our philosophy as well. Let's see if it's a good fit. Most people need help, and we need it from a professional who knows things that we don't know. So thank you again, Russell.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.